So we're continuing on our journey throughout the Jurassic World universe, and we've now arrived at Jurassic World, a film that actually shows John Hammond's original vision live and as it should be. So, without any further ado, welcome to Jurassic World. Jurassic World is a movie that was released in 2015, starring Chris Pratt, Bryce Dallas Howard, and directed by Colin Trevorrow. I watched this once and once alone. That was when it came out in the cinema in 2015, and I've only just now rewatched it. And that first part where you see the park in all its glory, it just fills you with the excitement. The excitement hits you. It's almost if like you've gone to Disneyland for the first time. You just see everything there, and it looks clean, it looks modern, it just looks incredible. And ah, if the whole film just had that same vibe throughout it, this would be right up there with the original. But unfortunately, it does sort of drop off. It almost rushes itself through the first part of the film, and then is quite a slow burn after a certain point. But the movie begins focusing in on two young boys. You've got Zach and Gray Mitchell, who are young lads going off to Jurassic World for a week to go and spend that time with their Aunt Claire, who is in some sort of management role at the park. And it follows them all the way into the park. So you see the different parts. You see them obviously just get on the plane, go to Costa Rica. When they land, you've got the boat that takes them over to it. And it is very Disneyland-ish. It really is. It's all labelled with Isla Nublar. They go over to it. You've got the big welcome centre. You've got the hotel room where they agree, or where they meet essentially their babysitter for the whole time that they're there. And then when they're in the hotel, the young boy opens the doors in excitement, and you feel that excitement. And again, it just opens up to the entire park, and you see everything there. And it's amazing to see, because that's exactly what's missing from the franchise so far, is that you don't actually see what the park should have been. We were then introduced to Claire, who is, like I say, she's in the management role at the park. And what's interesting is the complete contrast between the excitement of the young boy and the angst teenager older brother. But you get the contrast with her agenda, which is the corporate and financial structure of the park and the business. And what she's trying to do is make sure that the business stays afloat, make sure the profits remain up. And whilst they are doing well, she wants them to do better. She's worried constantly about the future of the park, about its future existence. And she's seemingly of the mindset of eventually people will get bored of just seeing standard dinosaurs. I think she uses a line where people now see a T-Rex or a Stegosaurus as you would do an elephant at a zoo. So what she's trying to do is get investors or outside investors to sponsor particular animals, whilst also creating a whole new breed of dinosaur. And in doing that, or the way she is doing that, is using genetics to fuse two DNA samples or multiple DNA samples together to create something completely new. And it throws back to the original movie where you're talking about playing God, but this isn't something where you're bringing something back from extinction that did live before. You are doing something completely, fully unnatural now. You're going one step beyond what was deemed to be unnatural in the first place. Now, it's just after this that we're introduced to the owner of the park, Mr. Masrani, who is he's sort of like the eccentric billionaire behind it all. And there's a line in there where he mentions that he has basically been entrusted by John Hammond to execute his dying wish, which is the park. And the whole point of the park isn't profits or isn't all about financial security, but it is only about the welfare of the dinosaurs and the enjoyment of others who are visiting. They go and visit the enclosure for the new dinosaur that's been created, which is the Indominus Rex. It's a mixture between the T-Rex and a hidden sort of genetic sample. So the only thing we know is it's part T-Rex, and the only other thing we know is that it's going to grow to be a lot larger than T-Rex with more teeth. that seemingly is the remit behind building up this new dinosaur, is that people want something scarier, they want something more dangerous and more thrilling behind it. So that's exactly what they've done. But the problem is that it's quickly established that this dinosaur is quite intelligent and that it's trying to break free from its surroundings by trying to break the glass into the observation room. Because of this, Masrani wants Claire to go and recruit Owen Grady and bring him over to the enclosure to inspect it. And this is where we're introduced to Owen Grady, who is played by Chris Pratt. Now, he is a very interesting character, I'll have to admit, and I'm a little bit disappointed that they debunked the theory that he is the young kid from the Jurassic Park at the opening, when they're at the dig site, being sort of lectured about the dangerous nature of velociraptors and having more respect for the animals that are there or that they're digging up, because that would have been absolutely perfect. Because the way that he talks about the velociraptors, and that he has, I mean, the whole point of him being there is that he's running a study to measure their intelligence, but also trying to adapt them to respond to commands by humans and sort of almost train them. He is almost like the park trainer. And his training methods do have some form of success on the velociraptors. He's able to ward them off, he's able to stop them from attacking, and he mentions that he's imprinted on them, similar to the way John Hammond has went about it in the first place. And I always thought that was a bit of a missed opportunity in the first movie, the fact that he's imprinted himself on every single animal when they were born or when they hatched out of their eggs. But now it seems though they've taken that and actually used it as part of the story, which is the reason why the dinosaurs of velociraptors are very much obedient towards Owen. But he's also got his issues, and that is that he is trying to sort of fight back against one of InGen's employees in Hoskins, who is essentially trying to use the raptors as part of a military initiative to replace soldiers in the field of battle, basically. His idea is that if they were able to train the velociraptors, they could get them out in the field and they would be able to save so many soldiers' lives because these are natural killing machines. Again, it's the theme of control and misguided control that sort of rules over this film, and again harks back to the original Jurassic Park. And you've got those characters in it that are trying to teach humility and respect towards what they've ultimately got in front of them, which are dangerous predators. And no matter how much you try to control them or how much you feel as though you have control over them, you'll never have full control, and the consequences of that are horrendous. Anyway, Grady gets brought over to the Andonomus Rex enclosure, and that's where he sees the scratch marks that look as if it's climbed up the wall to escape. He then goes into the enclosure with a couple of others to go and inspect the marks sort of more closely, believing that the Andonomus Rex has escaped the enclosure. But it turns out it hasn't. It's been able to lower its body temperature to prevent being detected. Whilst they're in the enclosure, they try to escape, and before they can close the gate, the Andonomus Rex breaks free. And that's where we have the main plot of the film. It's the fact you've now got a new breed of dinosaur that's more dangerous than anything else in the park. It's essentially the top of the food chain in there, including the humans, and it's just now laying waste to everything it encounters in the park. And the whole reason behind this is just that it's essentially been bred in captivity. It doesn't understand how to engage with its surroundings, and it doesn't know how to engage with other creatures around it. So it's just become aware of how powerful it is, and it's determining itself as top of the food chain. And we see other powers that it has. It's able to camouflage itself. It's got a high level of intelligence. The fact it can dig out its own tracking chip that's embedded in its head. And there is a scene in there where they send sort of like a military unit in there to try and put it under or try and tranquilize it. But it's almost like a scene from Predator, if I'm honest. It blends that horror aspect very nicely into the rest of the movie, and it's not too over the top. It gives you the sense of this thing is almost unstoppable, the way it just wipes people out so easily. But at the same time, it just feels like there's something missing in it. Anyway, the two boys are going off on their own. They're enjoying the rides, and they end up on the gyrosphere going out amongst the herd of animals. And in between this time, when they've been enjoying the park, the young boy is talking about the issues he's got, or the concerns he's got about parents being divorced or getting divorced. and that causes the older brother to try and cheer him up by going off-road in the gyrosphere. The decision has been made by Claire to close down most of the rides north of the park that are closest to where the Andromedus Rex has escaped from. The original plan, or the original idea that Owen had put forward, was to evacuate the park altogether. But it's here where we see the clash taking place, where we've got Owen's sort of priority are the lives of everybody in the park and trying to get them out before anything bad goes wrong. The problem that Claire's got is the financial security of the company, in that she knows that the park will never be able to recover if they shut it down because of a dinosaur getting free, and she would never be able to get the profits back, and the money would not come in anymore, and ultimately the park would just die. The two lads go off-road and encounter the Andromedus Rex and narrowly escape. Claire realises they're out there, so she takes Owen to go and try and track the boys down, which they do manage to do in the end. And then at the same time, Masrani leads a mission in a helicopter to try and gun down the Andromedus Rex before it can cause any other sort of damage to either the animals or people in the park. That results in the pterodactyl enclosure basically being breached and pterodactyls just being released out into the world and attacking every single person in the park. Now, the other threat in this movie, and one that just seems to be ignored by everybody in it, including the audience, I mean, you almost forget that this animal exists in the park, and that is their version of Shamu, basically, or whatever it's called now. But at Sea Life Centre, you have the big whale in the tank. It's basically that version, but a dinosaur. It's incredibly large as well that you see, and it's extremely dangerous. And the fact is that it's confined to the water, so that is the reason why you almost ignore it, because it's only one area of the park that it's sort of located in. But the problem is that you then sort of see the animals when they all come together, just how dangerous the environment is, because there's just no escape from it. You see the person that's been babysitting the two boys get dragged off by pterodactyls, and she's dunked into the water to try and almost like trying to sort of stone a fish almost. But while she's in the water, the big animal comes up and eats her and the pterodactyl in one gulp. It's a great way of just showing absolute chaos and pandemonium just taking place as panic just sets in. And it's quite harrowing the way you sort of just describing it. But again, it's just something missing from it. Masrani ultimately dies in that whole incident with the helicopter. The helicopter gets hit by multiple pterodactyls and then crashes, and he dies in that explosion. And that gives power of the company to Hoskins, who then decides to put in his military operation into effect. So his plan is to use the velociraptors to track down the Andromedus Rex with the help of Owen, who will be able to keep them under control. They go in there, they go and attack the Andromedus Rex, bring it down, kill it, and that's it, job done. And it's this point of the film where the enjoyment for me sort of stopped, when I start to sit there and I start sighing at just almost it jumping the shark. And I get that it's unrealistic in the fact you've cloned dinosaurs, and dinosaurs are now sort of like attractions like being in a zoo, but it loses its edge. The velociraptors for me were always the underrated major threats in the parks, in that they were always the ones that, whilst everyone sort of thought the Tyrannosaurus Rex was the major threat because of how big it was, the velociraptors were easily the most dangerous, the way they sort of worked together as one unit and brought everyone down. In this movie, they're just nullified to be helping the humans alongside it. And that's the point where I almost sort of checked out, but luckily it saved itself, because when the raptors do encounter the Andromedus Rex, the theme or the theory from Jurassic Park 3 about the communication comes back into effect, where they start communicating with the Andromedus Rex, and it's revealed the reason why there were certain elements of the genetic code that were hidden was because it's part raptor. And the raptors have ultimately found a new alpha, replacing Owen. They turn against the humans, and it's now the humans against the raptors and the Andromedus Rex as well. Now, one key thing I just remembered is that there is a character that's come from the original trilogy, or from the original film, I should say, and been brought over to this one, and that is Dr. Henry Wu, who was the geneticist in the original Jurassic Park. He is responsible for designing the Andromedus Rex. I've got an issue with him being in it. I understand why, because you've got a tie with the original park, and it makes sense to have someone who was an expert in their field for the original park, who not only could tell people about the mistakes that were made, but can also bring his knowledge to the table and make it work. But the problem is they've changed his character from somebody who was, albeit misguided in his confidence of how well he had designed these creatures. He thought he had created the perfect system where the animals couldn't breed without permission. He thought he created a system where if the animals became too dangerous, they would eventually die out because they wouldn't have access to a certain hormone. But they've made him now almost seem like an evil scientist, as if though his agenda is just to make this park happen no matter what, and without any care of the consequences for the actions, even though he saw firsthand what happened at the original park. He's gone along with the remit to create the most dangerous dinosaur possible, and has used the most dangerous sort of DNA genetic codes and put them together. It doesn't really make any sense, including stuff like putting in filling in the gaps in the code with animals that can give it certain skills like camouflage and lowering its body temperature, and it just makes it seem so ridiculously overpowered as a result, and it just doesn't make any sense in keeping with the character that's been established. But ultimately, it's led to a final confrontation where you've got the Adonis Rex versus the Raptors, who come back on side after reaffirming Owen as their alpha, their leader. And we then have perhaps the most disappointing climax that I could have expected out of this film, and that is Bryce Dallas Howard going off to retrieve the T-Rex and bring it to the fight with the use of a flare and outrunning it. And I've got issues with that for so many different reasons. So reason number one, Bryce Dallas Howard is constantly wearing high heels in this movie and is running around like an idiot throughout this film. You're trying to outrun dinosaurs, but you still wear that footwear. Just take them off. And it's even mentioned in the film very early on. But even so, she goes through the effort of taking off her or unbuttoning her blouse and tying it up to make it look as though she's ready for action, but doesn't remove those shoes. And it's just, it doesn't make any sense. I don't understand why mention it and then don't do anything about it. The second reason is in the first movie, it's established that the T-Rex can run at 30 miles an hour. No human is running at 30 miles an hour. No human is running beyond that. In actual fact, in the first movie, they only just outrun it in a Jeep. So how is she managing to outrun the T-Rex? Again, doesn't make any sense. And it's just, again, it's classic plot armor to get through it. And the third part is it all just culminates in a CGI mess. And it's the reason why, if you've watched the Transformers movies, it's the reason why people check out with those, is because we care about the humans. We resonate with the human beings in these movies because they're the ones we can relate to. We don't care about dinosaurs. We don't side with the dinosaurs. But anyway, the T-Rex, the Velociraptors, which is mainly Baloo, who's the main Velociraptor, the beta of the group, that has a special bond with Chris Pratt's character. Those two and the water demon, I will call it. I have no idea what it's actually called. They all combine together to actually kill the Andominus Rex, and it's all happy days. The park, however, is gone. It's just been completely destroyed, and like Claire thought at the very beginning, there is no recovering from this. The park is done. And just to highlight that fact, the T-Rex closes the film by essentially reigning supreme over the entire park and roaring and just showing that actually they've taken it over. That's the end. Done. The one thing I just wish, I think it was a missed opportunity on this film to not show more of the park at the beginning. I mentioned that it rushes itself through the first part and then is almost a slow burn afterwards. What I mean by that is it takes about 35 minutes before the Adonis Rex escapes its pen. In the first movie, you get a lot more of the park, so you get to see a lot more of the way it should be, and then there's a heavy contrast to when things go wrong. With this, you see almost nothing of the park. In 35 minutes, you're introduced to multiple characters for the first time, as well as the setting. And it isn't the same as Jurassic Park. You see that because of the ruins of the original Jurassic Park are shown throughout the movie. This is something completely different, and you don't see enough of the park, if I'm honest. The other thing I sort of mentioned was that this movie does feel hollow in its almost horror elements that have come to be expected from a Jurassic Park film. And I think the reason behind that is because there's no sense of claustrophobia anymore. It's all out in the open. Every single attack that takes place is outside, and it's just there's no sense that there's no escape. There's always a way out as long as you can as long as you can run fast enough. And yeah, again, it just seems it just loses that element there. So overall, this movie is a decent film and it is a decent watch. It does do a very good job in creating a new threat and just highlighting just how much more dangerous it is compared to what we already know. It shows it to be a lot bigger, a lot smarter, and a lot more imposing than what the Tyrannosaurus Rex is. It also shows it to be or to have skills that eclipse those of the Velociraptor to make it more dangerous than that as well. And in the final battle, what we see is that the Tyrannosaurus and the Velociraptor, the two dinosaurs that are shown to be the biggest threats in the previous movies, are unable to deal with this new dinosaur. And all of that together just shows how imposing that new one is. It also does a very good job with the plot in having multiple different storylines that converge together because of one incident. And I do like films like that are quite nice, and the fact the threads are initially separate and they all come together quite nicely. And it's very clear and quite easy to follow as well, which makes it a lot better to watch. As I said, it does get to a point where it almost becomes too over the top, but up until that point, it is a decent film to watch. And it's, that for me would be a fantastic movie if it wasn't for the parts that hinder it, in that there's a rushed beginning of it and it drags out the second half. The point where it becomes a little bit too unrealistic and almost causes you to check out, as well as the CGI bloating inside the movie. And because of those reasons, I'm going to give it a 4-star rating. So what did you guys think of Jurassic World? As always, I'd love to hear what you guys had to think about it or had to say about it. So please pop everything in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll be back again with Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, but until then, I will see you again soon.